Jennifer Griffin is standing by with the very latest from the Pentagon. And Jennifer, I understand you have brand new information on the servicemen and women that were affected by this, the number of that was killed and injured. What do we know now?
Well, Sandra, we've been waiting to report this very grim news, but I can report now, based on conversations with U.S. officials, that 4 U.S. Marines were killed in that explosion outside Abbey Gate. 3 U.S. Marines were also wounded in that attack. So 7 service members injured and killed in the attack on Abbey Gate. It is a terrible, terrible scene outside the Abbey Gate. We've seen the video of the Afghan civilians, women and children who were killed in the attack. The Taliban have just put out a statement trying to distance themselves from it, condemning the attack. No attribution as of yet from official U.S. government sources about who was responsible for these 2 bombings. Remember, there was one suicide bombing, an individual with a suicide vest outside Abbey Gate. And then there was another explosion that we reported on at the Barron Hotel about 200 yards away, where, as John reported, there were 169 Americans airlifted by Chinook a few days ago to safety into the airport. So, but very, very terrible news. We can confirm that 4 U.S. Marines were killed in the attacks this morning outside Kabul airport. 3 were wounded, some seriously. Sandra?
Just absolutely brutal. And our hearts and our thoughts with those families that are affected, these Marines, as the number is 4 U.S. Marines killed in Kabul in this airport attack, 3 wounded. Jennifer, you've been covering this since day one. Your thoughts in this moment as we are waiting any sort of update. We know that the president's been huddled in the Situation Room. We know that there was a meeting that was happening earlier that has been canceled in the wake of this situation. We're awaiting the press secretary at the White House. We have not yet heard from her. That was also on the schedule. That has been postponed and delayed. We await an update from the Pentagon. Your thoughts?
Well, I think what strikes me most at this moment is that this was the day that everyone who knew when they landed at the Kabul airport and they secured the perimeter, the 82nd Airborne secured the perimeter. You had U.S. Marines standing guard trying to help as just 32 State Department consular officers tried to screen passengers coming into the airport. They somehow, by a miracle, got 100,000 Afghan evacuees airlifted since August 14th, the largest airlift in U.S. history. But this was the day they were worried about. The State Department put out that warning last night. They had very serious intelligence threats on those gates. They told Americans to leave those gates. The U.S. Marines, we've seen images in recent days, and we know from firsthand reporting, they were responsible for standing on either side of that razor wire that was put around the airport. You had thousands of Afghans, nearly half a mile deep, trying to get through these 3 or 4 gates into the Kabul airport. It was an unbelievable task to try and screen people, get them inside. Right now, what we know that there is a trauma medical area at the airport that would have been set up as part of this mission in the event of a mass casualty event like we've seen this morning. You also will have to have, they had to have medevac capabilities. We don't know if those 3 wounded Marines have been medevaced out of the country as of yet, or whether they're being treated on the ground. But they were set up for, in the event of this kind of situation. It's just a terrible, terrible tragedy that it came to this before they got to the August 31st deadline.
Jennifer, hey, it's John here. This really is a horrible new development in all of this, but it was one that Britain had been warning about, and now the Taliban actually responding in a tweet saying the Islamic Emirate strongly condemns the bombing of civilians at Kabul airport, which took place in an area where U.S. forces are responsible for security. The Islamic Emirate is paying close attention to the security and protection of its people, and evil circles will be strictly stopped. H.R. McMaster, talking this morning with our Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino, suggested that this bombing, or the series of bombings, may have actually been orchestrated by the Taliban as a straw man to try to humiliate the United States. Now, the U.S. military and the United States have said that if the Taliban were to attack, it would respond. But if another organization, maybe even a proxy, working on behalf of the Taliban were to mount these attacks, What is the U.S. response? What are the rules of engagement there?
Well, I think that's, first of all, that's highly speculative on the part of H.R. McMaster's part. Yes, in these kind of situations, do terror groups, even if they aren't allies, and ISIS-K and Taliban are not allies, do they sometimes use the Taliban know that if this attack were linked to them, that the U.S. would take action, and they are sitting at the presidential palace now. Mullah Baradar is the leader of this new government, and there would be targets for the Americans to respond to. Without knowing who is responsible, it's very difficult to strike back. And so it is extremely unlikely that they're going to know for certain in any real time at this moment who is responsible for this attack. What you can say is that the Taliban were responsible for securing the perimeter around the airport. Somehow this bomber got through, and the U.S. is in a terrible, terrible situation where they were relying on the Taliban for security around the perimeter of the airport. The Marines who were guarding the actual airport perimeter and trying to also, remember, they were trying to evacuate as many people as possible, and as many valid Afghans and Americans as possible, checking paperwork. They were lifting babies over the walls of these compounds. They were trying to be as humane as possible, while at the same time remembering the terrible security situation. You mentioned that the British warned about this kind of possible attack. The U.S. government warned about it. We heard the State Department put out a warning last night. It was as specific as I've ever heard a warning from the State Department. The President warned about this. The Pentagon has been warning about this. They knew that this was a very real possibility. They also knew that they had a mission and that they had promised to get all Americans out, as well as SIV holders. This was a ticking time bomb, and unfortunately, terrorist groups inside the country took advantage of it.
Jennifer Griffin, you will keep us posted with any further updates. As we now know, it was 4 U.S. Marines that were killed in that attack at the Kabul airport, 3 injured. Jennifer, thank you.